First thing, is there a supplementary agenda?
There is no supplementary agenda, nor are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest that were reported today.
All right, we'll get right into planning then.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1, the clerk will announce each individual planning item. 2, the clerk will advise if any written submissions have been received regarding a planning item. If so, the clerk will read the written submissions that have been received. 3, for any items where a written submission is received, administration will proceed with a presentation. 4, council will be asked if it has any questions of administration or the applicant, if present. 5, council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the item. Notice, if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make a submission to the municipal clerk of the corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, They are not entitled to appeal a decision to the local planning appeal tribunal if otherwise eligible, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or who have made a submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk. Thank you.
First item, 8A, applications for official plan amendment, OPA 60, zoning bylaw amendment, and consent. 2743576 Ontario Inc., 320 Grand Ave East, Community of Chatham, City. Mr. Mayor, there have been no public letters received, and the applicant and consultant are present online.
Councillor Crew and Councillor Solomon, can I get you to put on the floor, please?
I'd be happy to move the recommendations.
Seconded.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes. 8B, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, the Andersons Canada Limited, 6857 Pancourt Line, Community of Dover, North Kent. Mr. Mayor, there has been no public letters received, and the consultant is present online.
Councillor McGrail and Councillor Foss, can I get you to put it on the floor, please?
Sure, I'll be glad to move that.
I'll second that.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Waiting for one more. Please make sure you hit your submit button. All votes are in. Motion passes. 8C, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, the Andersons Canada Limited, 120 Chatham Street North, Community of Blenheim. Mr. Mayor, no public letters have been received, and the consultant is present online.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Thompson, can I get you to put on the floor, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
And seconded.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I had a question. That's why I raised my hand.
Councillor Thompson?
Just a simple one from a resident who lived in the area. The zoning change, that doesn't really change what can happen on the site. I think one or two of them were worried that there could be a wholesale change to what is being, done behind their property.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's correct. There will be no change in land use here. The zoning bylaw amendment is simply, it enables the properties to continue to function as one, as they do now, while under common ownership, without getting into constraints over setbacks and lot area and some very technical things. But the properties will not change their use. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes. 8D, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, the Andersons Canada Limited, 23696 Kentbridge Road, Community of Chatham Township. Mr. Mayor, no public letters have been received, and the consultant is present online.
Councillor Kirkwood White and Councillor B. McGregor, can you put it on the floor, please?
Yes, thank you. I'll move the motion.
Seconded.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Waiting for one more. All votes are in. Eight E, application for consent and deeming bylaw, William and Carol Ann Johnston, 930 North Street, Community of Dresden. Mr. Mayor, the applicant is not online. However, I have received one letter from the public and I will read it now. Members of council, my wife and I own the property at 187 Holden Street. We are directly north of the proposed lot. Currently, our house is being rented to one of our sons. We decided to purchase this house for us to live in when we retire. We have completed many improvements to the house to make it more comfortable when we are ready. This is a quiet street, and from our vantage point, our backyard adjoins to what looks to be a few acres of manicured open space. So far, it has been very peaceful. We do have a few concerns on how this will change our perspective of having a tranquil and peaceful backyard. I also would have to believe that others living on Mooney Street could also do the same at some point. The prospective receiver of the severed land wants it for increased amenity and recreational space. I can understand why they would want a larger backyard. However, it could create a negative effect for our own enjoyment and peacefulness and privacy that we currently have. We would not be in favor of this severance for that reason. If the buyer installed a proper privacy fence along the property line, we would be more in favor. Thank you, Donna and Alan Pellerin.
Councillor Foss and Councillor McGrail, can I get you put on the floor, please?
Also move.
I will second.
Any questions? Okay, prior to vote, Ryan needs to do a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's fairly straightforward. Transfer of land from one residential backyard to another on neighboring streets. I did talk to the owner of the lot at 935 Mooney Street, who will be receiving these lands. They are committed to building a privacy fence around this area after they take possession. That's all I have to add, unless council has any questions. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Okay, we'll move into the consent agenda. Sorry, we'll go to deputations first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one deputation for this evening. It is with regards to item 12B, which is the application for site plan control, Sunmaster Produce Inc., Medicine Inc., 6640 Rivard Line, Community of Dover. Dear Council, this is to inform Chatham-Kent Council regarding the building permit for Sunmaster Produce Inc. I do not approve this building permit. Sunmaster Produce Inc. drains through a private drain which belongs to JP Kuchar Farms Inc. The corporation has a legal agreement which states the drainage outlet has a maximum of 250 millimeter in diameter. Through my personal investigation, the drainage outlet measures approximately 380 millimeters, which is contrary to our signed agreement. This outlet must be reduced to 250 millimeters as per our agreement. The 250 millimeter outlet is not sufficient for the building addition. A copy of the drainage legal agreement is enclosed and has been emailed to council. Thank you, JP Kuchar and MJ Kuchar. Those are all the deputations this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the consent agenda now.
So, Mr. Mayor, we have several reports that are pulled this evening. We do have a slide to put up on the screen to allow us to be transparent and show the public and councillors which reports have been pulled and by whom. We'll just get that up on the screen and then I will read them out. So we will be pulling 10A, which has been pulled by Councillor Harrigan, Latimer, and Sakachi. 10B, which is the Ontario Health Team Update by Councillor Latimer. 10C, CK Tourism Sector Recovery by Councillor Latimer. 11B has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi, the Tender Award Contract T20-262 New Scotland Line over the Ross Drain Culvert Replacement. And 11C pulled by Councillor Latimer and Councillor Sakachi regarding single source T20-274 roof replacement to Chatham Road, Blenheim. 12A has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Latimer, and Councillor Brock McGregor with regards to rural and urban tree cover in Chatham-Kent. 12B pulled by Councillor McGrail, the application for site plan control for Sunmaster Produce, Inc. 12D by Councillor Latimer, Hitchcock Road name change to Tweedsmuir Ave West. 13A by Councillor Hall, the Connecting Links Program application, Dufferin Ave Rehabilitation. 13B has been pulled by Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Hall with regards to the school zone speed limits and community safety zones, Phase 3. Councillor Sakachi has pulled 13C, which is his motion with regards to community beautification service levels. And 14A by Councillor Latimer, which is her motion with regards to the return to pre-COVID-19 approved budget service levels. Mr. Mayor, that leaves 5 reports to be voted on for the consent agenda, which will be 9A, 11A, 12C, E, and F.
Councillor Hall and Councillor Finn, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move, Mayor Kenneth.
Happy to second.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Okay, item 10, information reports.
10A, Human and Social Impacts of COVID-19. Mr. Mayor, we have a presentation by Allison Gillespie.
Hello, and thank you for allowing us to present before you today. Before I begin, I would like to take the time to thank everyone for their hard work and contributions to this report. And I would also like to especially thank the United Way of Chatham-Kent for partnering and helping us as they had already started this work in gathering community impact by forming their COVID-19 response and recovery strategy. Here with me today, there are 4 key people that were involved in the process. Steve Pratt from United Way of Chatham-Kent, Laura Zettler, the manager of the Foundational Standards team, an epidemiologist from the Chatham-Kent Public Health Unit, Teresa Bendeau, director of the Chatham-Kent Public Health, and my co-author of this report, Laura Fay, a public health nurse from Chatham-Kent Public Health, and all are here to help answer any questions that you may have. So as many of us know, the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus disease, or COVID-19, a global pandemic on March 11th of 2020. This led to governments at all levels, public health and non-profit organizations to begin working towards flattening the curve. And many large-scale interventions were implemented, such as physical and social distancing measures, as well as many others. Locally, here in Chatham-Kent, a state of emergency was declared on March 13th in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. On June 29th, the municipality of Chatham-Kent's council passed a motion requesting recommendations for mitigating the human, social, and community impacts of COVID-19. Today, we are presenting on these impacts that COVID-19 has had on Chatham-Kent. The initial gathering of the information for this report was done at a high level and focused on working with groups that have already been gathering information on the impacts of COVID-19 in order to avoid the duplication of work. In our next steps to respond to this motion, we are going to be looking at how to address these impacts within our local community. And to do that, it will require extensive engagement with targeted stakeholders and key populations. With this next phase, another report will come before Council addressing the recommendations for mitigating the impacts of COVID-19. Next slide, please. In response to the motion, Chatham-Kent Public Health completed an environmental scan of the available literature to identify the human and social impacts of COVID-19 on individuals. In addition, Chatham-Kent Public Health partnered with the United Way of Chatham-Kent as they had established a COVID-19 community response and recovery strategy to facilitate a local COVID-19 response to determine the needs, gaps, and opportunities within the community as a result of the pandemic. This allowed for us to review information that had previously been collected at the United Way situational tables and to conduct a survey with the situational tables as well as with the Chatham-Kent Community Nonprofit Network to get a better understanding of what was happening locally. Lastly, Chatham-Kent Public Health hosted a meeting with departments from the Community Human Services Division, and municipal stakeholders confirmed many of the findings from the literature and surveys, as well as contributed further insights to the impacts COVID-19 has had. Next slide, please. As we reviewed the findings from the literature and consultations, we identified 10 themes, which are seen here on the screen. These themes were drawn out and separated into two categories of things that have experienced an increase due to COVID-19 and things that have created concern within the COVID-19 pandemic. A full explanation for each theme can be found with the report. Next slide, please. This image displayed on the screen, it demonstrates the social determinants of health, which are factors that determine our health. Our findings of the impacts of COVID-19 in Chatham-Kent found that many of these social determinants of health have been impacted. Overall, our findings are large system-level issues that will require a coordinated and collaborative response across sectors addressing these social determinants of health. Next slide, please. In our next steps, we will be working to engage multiple stakeholders and key populations. It is important to recognize that this work takes time in order to do it properly. Therefore, assuming that we have the appropriate time, our next steps to address the human, social, and community impacts of COVID-19 is to conduct community consultations with targeted stakeholders and key populations to develop recommendations to help mitigate the negative impacts. These recommendations from our consultations will then be provided in a recommendation report to Council. Thank you for your time, and we are open to any questions that Council may have.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Scotchy, can I get you to put on the floor, please?
Absolutely, Mayor Caniff. Happy to receive the report.
Consider it a second, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, I'll turn over the questions. Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Scotchy, and then Councillor Latimer.
Great, thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you very much for that presentation. I recognize that there were a large number of people across our community who put work into providing this information to Council, which was incredibly well researched, very in depth, and was, you know, for me, very eye-opening in terms of just how much COVID-19 has magnified some of the problems that we face in our community. My question through the mayor is first to April, and in some ways this was answered in the report and on the slide that we're looking at is next steps is, you know, where do we go from here and how do we identify which priority areas of those 10 focus areas we're going to tackle as a community? So once we gather all of that information, what does next look like? How do you think your staff are going to identify what those recommendations are in the fall?
Through you, Mayor Kenneth. Thank you, Councillor Harrigan, for the question. I think for Community Human Services and for the Chatham community, we will look at developing recommendations that probably address some of everything in the report. It is a significant amount of information, a significant number of issues that are long-standing issues. Teams have worked for years within the social determinants of health. I think what COVID-19 has shone a spotlight on a number of areas, certainly that Alice identified and the team that worked to pull the information together. And it's also highlighted some other things that COVID-19 and a pandemic created. So for us, it will be, now that we've got the literature out there, now that we have confirmed that what's happening in Chatham-Kent is similar to what the literature is presenting, we will take some time to do some more consultations with a number of community partners and some of our priority groups. So while the work that's been done to date is wonderful, it's lots of data, lots of information for us, we need to talk now to the people that are living through COVID-19 and the people that are delivering frontline services through COVID-19, pull that together, and then also work with our municipal partners who are looking at the economic recovery, working with our CK Plan 2035 group, making sure that all of our goals and recommendations align in order to provide the best recommendations to council that we can. We would like that to be done before we head into budget in the event that there are resources that require some allocations. But off the top of my head, really, and from kind of my team's thinking, those top social determinants of health are front and center. People need housing, people need jobs, people need childcare, people need good food to eat. In order for us to improve overall wellness in this community. So lots more to come as we move forward.
Great, thank you. And just in follow-up to that, through the mayor to Mr. Shropshire, Don, when we received the report from the Economic Recovery Task Force, and I had an opportunity to review this, I actually saw quite a number of overlapping issues identified. And so I wonder if you can speak to that, and then also speak to how this report may inform us as we go into further conversations about our growth strategy and some of our budget goals.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Through the chair, so I agree that they're very closely coupled. As April just spoke to a moment ago, the social determinants of health, all of those economic activities and drivers impact people's ability for economic well-being or economic recovery. So I think as we're starting to plan our strategies, we are going to have to pay particular attention to the vulnerable populations that have been hardest hit through the COVID disaster. So I think when we're sitting down and looking at the Economic Recovery Task Force, it's not just getting those folks back to work or trying to get them in a position where they can cope with the response to COVID, but it's also making sure that, you know, as a community as a whole, we have to make sure that those vulnerable populations are also cared for. We've seen a huge negative impact on COVID for our homeless population. We've had an increase by over 300%. We've also had, it's shone a light on people that are suffering from addictions and mental health issues. So as we start to move forward and look at our plans and respond to COVID, I think we definitely have to consider these groups as part of our overall strategy. And, you know, that work has been underway right now as as the report demonstrates, there's been a number of these groups that have already been, on the radar. We're trying to work through, but it's also, as April mentioned a moment ago, some of these challenges have been in place in the community for years and years and years, and council had identified as part of our term priorities that we also have to take a harder look and invest additional resources to try and deal with them. So they're closely coupled together, and I have every expectation at council, when they're striking the right balance or optimal balance between what we need to provide as a service level to these people. We're also going to be looking at that and balancing off how that impacts our taxpayers. So I think you put your finger on exactly the work in front of us. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mayor Caniff. And again, to April and team and our partners in the community, I can't thank you enough for the work that went into this. It certainly reminds us that having dinner on the table is a sign of being in a position of privilege. And we all need to think about that and be reminded of the positions that we're in as we navigate COVID as a community and as individuals, thinking about our health and well-being overall. So thank you very much.
Councillor Sakatchi, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I appreciate the floor. Almost all my questions have been answered by Mr. Shropshire and Dr. Reedike. I guess I just had one quick question for Dr. Reedike, and I'm not sure if maybe Mr. Quinton will have to weigh in as well. As the report was very well done. My concern is that, where we have a lot of positives in the community right now in regards to the development of our housing and, the kind of the market that's transpiring right now, that's also creating a very tough market for our local residents in regards to, I just read an article that the average home sales in Chatham-Kent has just hit a staggering $325,000, which is a good thing for many people, but for our local residents and people that are, seeing a real challenge right now with COVID is going to create a lot of issues in its own. So when we start talking about indwell and, affordable housing and all that, I just wanted to see kind of what as a municipality we are starting to do and look at to start to address affordable housing in our area that is going to be severely impacted by COVID.
Mayor Caniff, it's April Reedike, General Manager, Community and Human Services. Would you like me to take a first crack at that question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sakatchi, for the question. I think to start, it really is a combination of a number of departments. So certainly economic development, planning, building, they are working diligently to bring new construction, new builds, new units to our community. From an affordable housing perspective, we are embarking on some work to look at what does that look like in affordable housing. We have had some RFPs out. We're following up with a number of other opportunities, places, and organizations like Indwell, which we will be bringing to council in either late October or early November. We're still finalizing that to speak about supportive housing. And we are working to begin lobbying with all levels of government, provincial, federal, and obviously municipal, to put resources to affordable housing. And some of that might be new builds, some might be retrofits, some might be lobbying to have existing buildings be allowed to be retrofitted or replaced with housing. And so we are just really at the beginning of that. And certainly there will be a time where we will do council for some support, whether that be in written acknowledgement, written support, or what we would recommend some financial resources go towards building housing units, or some financial resources go to assisting young working individuals with those purchases of their first homes, or resources go to keeping people housed. If they have some repairs that need to be done to their home, it's much cheaper to assist a family fixing a roof or replacing a furnace than it is to find them alternative housing. So lots of things that we're working on, and we will update council as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I appreciate that, and it's it's nice to know that we are being diligent in that regard. And I would appreciate being kept apprised on that, how that goes. And if you ever need any assistance from council, please reach out. I'm glad to offer as much support as I can. Thank you.
Councilor Latimer?
Thank you, through the mayor. My question is to Steve Pratt, who I believe Allison said was available this evening.
Yeah, I'm here, Allison.
Perfect. Steve, that's okay, no worries. I know in our next steps, you're conducting community consultations to develop recommendations to help mitigate the negative human, social, and community impacts of COVID-19. For the public and for the rest of the council members who may or may not be aware, could you please advise the outcomes of the United Way's community table meetings that happen every Thursday morning, which involve our community partners and frontline service providers, along with municipal representatives, and how much money has been invested since April of this year, since the inception of COVID?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Latimer. Just want to, thank you for the question, for sure. So there's been 60 plus organizations, including members from the municipal administration, that have been meeting weekly since March. And we've had groups meeting around folks that provide emergency food services, folks that are helping, organizations that are helping people who are currently living in poverty, people who are experiencing homelessness, vulnerable seniors, people experiencing youth or intimate partner violence, mental health and addictions, our Indigenous people, and our vulnerable youth. And through those tables, we've currently funded 77 programs, and we created a co-investor table, understanding very early on in the pandemic that this is going to be greater than any one organization or level of government or person would be able to solve on their own, and we really have to come together to be able to work on this. And through these tables, it has informed the investment, again, into 77 programs for a total, as I left the office, I checked, of $1,367,707.75 that has been invested as of today. And there is another call for a round of funding that's going to be happening from October 5th to October 30th. And that'll again be in collaboration with our partners of the Chatham-Kent Community Foundation, the United Way of Chatham-Kent, the Canadian Red Cross, the Social Service Relief Fund through the provincial government, the Emergency Community Support Fund through the federal government, and also local philanthropists that have stepped up saying that we need to be in this together and we're not going to leave anyone behind. And while this report is incredible in terms of highlighting the issues that we have going on, there has been a significant number of investments that have happened to ensure that organizations have been able to rapidly pivot and be able to respond. So just because we can't do the social distancing piece from our current models, we've allowed them to be able to adapt and ensure that services could be provided to our most vulnerable. That being said, that we know, as the report mentions, there needs to be a much greater conversation that's happening around how we reimagine our social impact sector and how we're actually supporting one another and doing it together in a coordinated, collaborative, collective response manner. So really looking forward to seeing how some of these investments, like we're literally building the plane as we're flying it. So seeing how the result of what some of these investments have been, which will definitely help to inform some of the recommendations of where we need to be putting some more focus and helping our vulnerable community members be able to respond to COVID-19, because there's a number of them that just were not in a position to be able to prepare for what COVID-19 had brought. A number of issues that were pre-existing to COVID that have definitely been exacerbated through this process. So definitely very, very thankful for all of the work and support from municipal administration. It's been fantastic. And all of the organizations in the community that come each week to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind in our community.
Thank you, Steve. I want you to know that all of council and Chatham-Kent is very, very grateful for the work and support that you and all the co-investors and community partners have provided to this community. I think it's important to note, like in the recommendations of this report, that we are building on what is already happening out in our community with our partners. We're not reinventing the wheel, we're building and working towards that larger system level response versus the immediate day-to-day need response, which I think those community tables and co-investor table is going to continue to be the driving force in meeting these everyday needs as they occur. And I cannot thank you enough, Steve, or I guess state my admiration and respect for all the individuals involved in this COVID response in this community.
All right, thank you. So anyone opposed to receiving the report? Hearing none, we'll move that. Item 10B.
B, Ontario Health Team update.
I'd be happy to.
Councillor B. McGregor, do you second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you.
Councillor Latimer.
I just had a question through the mayor. I was seeing how you're including representatives from other, are you including any other representatives from other long-term care and retirement and senior services in Chatham-Kent besides St. Andrews? And how are you including that input? I know you are, but I wanted someone to comment on that, please.
Mayor Caniff, it's April Reed-Dyke, General Manager, Community Human Services. I will answer Councillor Latimer's question if that is okay with you.
Sure.
Certainly.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer, for that question. Certainly at the beginning of the initial application for the Ontario Health Team, we reached out to all of our long-term care and retirement homes. We had a number of stakeholder meetings that occurred. A number of our homes are connected to large organizations that run homes across the province. Not all of them, but certainly a number of those. So in the initial coming together of the groups indicated in that initial application, those were the only homes that at that time were authorized to step forward and formally join the Ontario Health Team, signing on in terms of the application form. So now that we are moving forward and entering that next stage, we are continuing to engage with long-term care and retirement homes. We have a forum where we meet together. Certainly COVID has helped facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
And we will be opening, certainly as we move forward, to looking at what other long-term care and retirement homes, what do they want to do as part of the Ontario for Chatham-Kent, and what can we do to assist them in coming on board and being part of that team. So it continues to be a work in progress, but all leading and moving forward to a good place.
That's important because I think if your one target is the population 55 plus with heart failure, angina, COPD, dementia, and diabetes, I think you need to have everyone involved who actually service that population. One other thing I wanted to ask is that you said one of your other targets was adopting a digital first approach and monitoring to see whether or not the OHT residents digitally access their health information. I don't, the second part of that statement, I'm not too, I'd be interested too, but I'm wondering if you could explain what a digital first approach involves. Would that be using digital assessment and treatment interventions along with on-site and in-person intervention?
So I think as a first kind of kick at digital health, I think we are moving towards, is there a place for an electronic medical record, a sharing of information, and resource management. So we want to look at digital first. We don't want to reinvent, as an example, a paper record where clients or patients would take that from organization to organization. We would like to be thinking digitally as our first kind of step. And then part of the goal of Ontario Health is to really put patients, residents, people in kind of the driver's seats of their own healthcare. And the only way they can do that is if they have access to their own health information. So I think when you talk about treatment, certainly those are pieces of it. Telemedicine is certainly probably here to stay now, and providing care electronically is here to stay. And we're really just beginning to unpack that. But one of our goals is, like I've indicated, we want to think digitally before we think paper-based resources and management.
That clarifies that for me. Thank you, Dr. Redike. And one last question. How does one know if you're 55 years plus in living in CK, whether you're part of the CK OHT residents that are part of this program? I had a person ask me that on the street, and I said, good question.
So it is a good question, actually. Thank you for that question. So anybody in Chatham-Kent who receives services from primary care, long-term care, any other kind of program and service that we provide through any of our health services, if you're 55 and over and are dealing with heart failure, angina, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, dementia, diabetes, or one of those things, then we will be looking, as we embark moving further, of really kind of looking at that care pathway and decreasing barriers to accessing good care, decreasing the number of times someone has to tell their story. So right now, nobody would be able to identify, put their hand up and say, I'm an OHT year one patient. Hopefully we will get there where we provide some seamless services throughout our community. So I hope that helps a little bit. But we're just now, because of COVID, obviously, we're just now formalizing our plans as we move forward with the start of year one.
Thank you very much, Dr. Redike. I look forward to seeing how this progresses in the coming year.
Anyone opposed to receiving the report? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 10C.
CK Tourism Sector Recovery, TIAO Regional Relief and Recovery Funding.
Councilor McGrail and Councilor Wright, can I get you put on the floor, please?
Sure, I'll be happy to move that.
I'll second it.
Okay, Councilor Latimer?
Thank you, through the mayor. I wondered if you could tell us what the business response has been to this action plan, and are we meeting their uncertainties?
It's Audrey Ansell here, and I'm happy to answer that question. So through you, Mayor Caniff, thank you for the comment, Councillor Latimer. So in response to your question there, we consulted with our tourism stakeholder group in terms of the plans that were in place and a good use of the funds. And part of that was to provide a toolkit to businesses operating in the tourism sector. And the response from the tourism group and other tourism stakeholders that we connected with was positive for that. So we have held 3 toolkit events, contactless pickup events in communities throughout Chatham-Kent. And we have an additional 2 this week to distribute those toolkits. The toolkits themselves contain locally produced hand sanitizer from 3 of our local producers. They also include a branded face mask, but more importantly, perhaps, is that they include some paper-based materials and tools regarding accessing and applying for a safe travel stamp through the World Travel Council. And that is a way to demonstrate that our businesses and our community are taking steps to ensure the safety of people who visit the community, including residents who also get out and support some of our tourism operators. The actual process for applying for that stamp is relatively simple, and for most part, our operators, certainly sort of restaurants or whatever, who would already be part of the public health response and be subject to public health inspections, that they would automatically qualify for that safe travel stamp. So I would say overall that the response has been favourable from those that we have heard from.
And of course, it's too soon to see whether there's any increase of traffic in their business and whatnot. Is there a way to track that? Do we have a way to evaluate whether or not this action has been a success, or how it could be improved?
Okay, through you, Mayor Caniff, thank you again, Councillor Latimer, for that question. So in terms of some of the feedback on that, certainly there is plans for the tourism team to have regular and ongoing contact, particularly with all of those that we have actually participated in the toolkit pickup events. We have had a number of BIAs and chambers who have supported us with that in several of the communities throughout Chatham-Kent. So we estimate that by the end of these giveaways, there will probably be over 300 toolkits actually distributed to tourism operators, and we will actively follow up with those to help them, support them to get the safe travel stamp if that is something that they're interested in, and then on an ongoing basis to see what difference this work is making and how we can work with them to support them moving forward, and also at the same time, obviously, some supports through economic development that would be available there.
I'm glad to hear the economic development is involved. I think you would work hand in hand there and to make better use of the time and the money as well. Thank you very much, Audrey.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Anyone opposed to receiving the report? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 11, tender awards.
11B, tender award contract T20-268, New Scotland Line over Ross Drain Culvert Replacement, Community of Howard.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Pincinel, can I get you put on the floor, please?
Happy to move that.
I'll second it, and I have a question.
Okay, Councillor Pincinel, then Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Worship. Just reading in here, and I'm sure, like it says, completion date by November 26th of 2021. Surely it's not going to be shut down for over a year, though. That's just, they got to have the job done by then. Am I reading that correctly?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Chris Tieber here, Director of Engineering. So yes, that's correct. The completion date for the project is November of 2021, but we're anticipating the construction to actually take about 5 weeks for this project, no more than 5 weeks. We just gave that completion date in order to be to get the best value for this project, to allow that flexibility for timing for construction with the contractor.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Just the last time New Scotland Line was closed, that was a long period of time, and the councillors in South Kent and East Kent took a lot of abuse during that time. So I'm glad to see it's going to take 5 weeks and be in precast. I guess that's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Canna. Mr. T-Bear, just a couple of quick questions. We all know the significant delay, as Councillor Pinsonneau just mentioned, that transpired on the emergency repair of New Scotland Line. And we all know the significance and the importance of the agricultural sector in our community. So Mr. T-Bear, is the adjacent landowners and the farmers in that area going to be consulted in an effort to mitigate the inconvenience, especially during planting and harvesting time?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. So yes, we will follow up with proper consultation, communication with all the adjacent landowners with this project. This one here, a little bit different from that one that happened in 2018. That was an emergency failure that occurred. This one is actually a planned one that we had identified through our OSIM records, came up with our bridge plan to be addressed. So we will follow up and have that proper consultation. Once we have that schedule, following the award of this contract here, we're going to do a pre-construction meeting with the contractor so that we can nail down a timeline as to when they're going to come in to proceed with construction. Once we have that schedule set, we will be happy to do public notification consultation with the adjacent farm owners utilizing this stretch of road.
Thank you. And then the last little comment I have, so like in the thought of being prudent with our spending, I recognize now that since my short term on council, that this is now the third time that New Scotland Line is going to see a closure. Was there a way to save significant tax dollars and inconvenience of the residents to bundle these projects together instead of individual contractors mobilizing during separate times of the contract and individual closures?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. So this project here was a bit unique as it's a precast concrete structure. I know we just completed a structure on New Scotland Line further west of this location. And then, of course, there was the emergency failure. But we do always strive and look for opportunities to bundle projects together if they're close together or if they're similar in nature in order to achieve a maximum cost efficiency with the project. This one here was just recognized as a standalone. There is no other culverts or bridges to this kind of scope or this kind of magnitude being identified in the immediate future, and it was recognized through the OSIM records that we had to get on top of it right away to address the safety concerns with some of the failing members. So again, not specifically for this project, but definitely we always look to opportunities like that, bundling those kind of projects in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. T-Bear. It's really important that I've heard that you say that you're going to be consulting the farmers in the area and the land adjacent. And thank you, Mayor Caniff, for the floor, as well as Mr. T-Bear for your time.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. My questions have been answered, but then brought forward by Councillor Sakatchi. I just wanted to reiterate that a 5-week window, while I mean that sounds good and it is good, the wrong 5 weeks could certainly be quite detrimental to farmers in the area. So I think when we go ahead and pick our scheduling time, we have to be cognizant that, say, the 5 weeks starting September 7th would be very, very bad. But I leave that to staff, and I have the utmost confidence. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, so we'll put it to vote.
Waiting for one more. Please remember to hit submit after you vote. All votes are in. Motion passes. Now move on to 11C, single source T20-274 roof replacement to Chatham Road, Blenheim.
Councillor Latimer and Councillor Sakatchi, can you put on the floor, please?
So moved. And I have a question.
Consider it a second, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Latimer, then Councillor Sakatchi.
Thank you. Just a clarification. The total cost would be funded from the recoverable expenses account. That means that, like any other order that's not followed up, we go in, we do the work, and we charge the owner for it, correct?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's Paul Lucina speaking. Yes, Councillor Latimer, that is correct. Once the work is completed, we will put the costs on the taxes.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Fellow members of council, I just wanted to comment briefly on this matter and kind of paint a picture prior to voting the severity of this issue that's transpiring here. Several months ago, after a very steady rainstorm on a Friday night, I had several residents coming to my place, knocking on my door, reaching out to me in regards to the issues that's transpiring. This was the first time that I heard about this issue, and you know, some of the issues that are being caused internally because of this roof leak is you know, very severe. In speaking with staff, this has been something they've been working on for quite some time. I really want to give a thanks to Mr. Lucina and Mr. Magliero for coming out on a Saturday morning. Many times after this initial conversation that I have with residents, they've continued to see a significant flooding and degrading of their building after each rainstorm. And as we know right now, we are seeing an absolute unprecedented times in the economy, and that goes into the housing sector as well. And I just hope that we utilize this bylaw to fix this private building. As the report states, the municipality will be recovering the cost of this, you know, via the internal policies. And just had a couple of quick questions for Mr. Lucina. Mr. Lucina, given your expertise, is it fair to assume that if this tender is not approved tonight, that there is also an almost certainty with this winter that's coming up that there's a real potential that these residents at this building with over 30 families could possibly be displaced?
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. That's correct. The continuation of water infiltrating a building could cause significant damage, which could result in an unsafe building order, which could result in families being told not to occupy and have to find other accommodations.
Do you feel that the ownership of the building has been given every effort to repair this roof in a timely manner?
Yes, we've been, as you have seen in the report, there was some difficulty in determining who the owners were back in 2019 when we started this or had this issue come to our attention. We have since been able to contact members of the board, who some of which are occupants of the building. They've had a number of opportunities to repair the structure, and to date haven't come through. So for the best interest of the residents living in the building, we thought that we would go ahead and fix the roof.
Mr. Lucina, will this repair be done this year before the winter?
Yes, it is our hope, pending on council's approval tonight, that we'll work with purchasing to award the tender, and work can proceed immediately.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lucina, and I really appreciate your team's effort on this matter. And I just want to ensure that council is aware that there are several seniors and families and residents in this building that have health issues, and they just emotionally can't afford financially to be displaced. Emotionally and financially, sorry, and I just really hope that everybody supports this tender, and I appreciate everybody's time on this matter.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Item 12, community development.
First item is 12A, rural and urban tree cover in Chatham-Kent.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you put on the floor, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second it.
Okay, Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I didn't know, is Gabriel on the line for comment, Ms. Mayor Caniff?
Yes, he is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a detailed report, Gabriel. I guess you know, the report is very detailed, which which I greatly appreciate. But you know, some of the aspects of the report, you do have to be technical or almost an arborist to basically go through this report. So I just wanted to see a couple things. I do notice that in February of 2021, they're going to be kind of looking at the details of how we're doing in regards to an improvement standpoint. But in your opinion, are we doing enough as a municipality from an incentivizing standpoint currently right now?
Gabriel, we can't hear you if you are speaking.
Hi there.
There you go.
Are we able to hear me? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So thank you very much, Councillor Sakachi, through Mr. Mayor, and to you. The question of incentivizing tree planting and any sort of environmental stewardship activity is, in my mind, a combination of education to provide people with the correct information so as to undertake activities that fall in line with our strategic objectives, and also to provide encouragement, sometimes through the form of monetary incentives and sometimes through rewards and other forms of recognition. Right now in Chatham-Kent, we offer the MIF-TIP program and the CL-TIP program. So those are the Managed Forest Tax Incentive Program and the Conservation Lands Tax Incentive Programs. Those are offered actually through the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. There's also the farm forestry exemption that was talked about in the report, and that one's actually administered through MPAC. And those three programs provide various forms of financial incentives to our landowners to retain forested areas in our community. The other one that I would like that was mentioned in the report is called Alternative Land Use Services. And Alternative Land Use Services is actually implemented through our partners through the LTVCA, the Conservation Authority. And Alternative Land Use Services focuses a little bit more on what I was referring to earlier in terms of education and incentives. So folks at the LTVCA will work with interested landowners to develop project plans for their properties and implement them. I know that the program has been to date very well received based on the conversations that I've been party to on the Partnership Advisory Committee, which oversees the implementation of ALICE. With regards to its sufficiency in terms of whether or not it's the various programs that we have in place are actually helping us achieve our goals, it's hard to say because we don't have a data set from which to understand change over time. So that's why in one of the recommendations, what we're suggesting is that we would do a remote sensing exercise, basically a photo analysis of Chatham-Kent in 2010, 2015, and 2020, which would allow us to identify changes in tree canopy and natural cover over those years. The date of 2021 that you're referring to in the report is the date or the estimated time frame for the provision of the 2020 orthophotography. So once it's received in February of 2021, our conservation partners and the municipality will then be able to undertake that analysis and compare 2020 with the previous two time periods that I've mentioned. And at that point, I think we'll be in a much better position to understand whether or not the objectives that Council and the community has established for natural environment and tree canopy in Chatham-Kent are actually being realized through these activities.
Thank you, Gabriel. I did fully plan on bringing a motion forward, when this report came in, but given the uncertainty of COVID as well as the timelines that you've generated, I do think that at this time it would be best for me to wait. I do want to recognize the last comment I have, one aspect of the report. When I brought the 1 million trees initiative, worked with, behind the scenes with the Ridge Landfill Community Trust, as well as, with Mayor Caniff's support and Councillor McGregor offered me some support as well. It's very, detailed in here in regards to that the $1 million of funding that we received can then transfer into a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that with stewardships and funding, that the potential is that $1 million is going to turn to $3 million. And in the report, it does make us a comment towards, this isn't going to be exact, but that money will provide a significant portion of the majority of the funding for the 1 million trees. Now, that's very beneficial as a South Kent councillor that we were able to secure that money and utilize it in South Kent. But it's also important that we are looking around the municipality and other areas to find stewardships and find different ways to incentivize the planting of trees and other private corporations, and as well as being a stakeholder ourselves municipally, that we start investing in our tree cover. So because of, like I said, the circumstances of the financial impact of COVID, as well as hearing this data, I am going to wait, but I greatly appreciate all the detail in this report, and I will turn it over for the other councillors to comment. Thank you so much.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Again, I wanted to compliment staff on the report. I think it's really helpful to see what tools are already in place and sort of what directions we're taking right now. I think at some point it would be helpful to put a summary of this report on Let's Talk CK, and maybe have some way to chart our progress with some of these programs. I was glad to see the adoption of the avoid harm, minimize harm, replace tree hierarchy for municipal projects, and the no net loss approach. And I think that really is an expectation that the community has of what we should be doing. So I'm glad to see it in writing. And I know we talked a bit about the incentive programs. So the Alternative Land Use Services Program, MFTIP, CLTIP, and the farm forestry exemption. I'm wondering what role we play in marketing those programs and making sure that landowners know there's some tools out there already for preservation and helping them access that.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Councillor, through the Mayor. So with regards to MFTIP and CLTIP, so the provincial programs, currently, as of right now, my understanding is the province has typically taken the lead in marketing those programs. My colleagues on the phone may have some additional information that I'm not privy to with regards to those two programs. The farm forestry exemption program is marketed by MPAC to qualifying landowners, from what I understand. And the ALICE program is marketed directly to the community through the stewardship activities of the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority.
Okay, thank you. And the report mentions briefly the development standards and the outline that one native tree is to be planted on the right of way in the front yard of new builds. So certainly when we look at some streets in mature neighborhoods, it's really obvious the long-term value of this approach, on aesthetics, on property value, and of course the environmental benefit. So what's the timeline for planting of native species on new developments after construction, and how does that apply to different forms of housing like multi-residential units, those types of things?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Through the Mayor, the actual management of the tree planting activities associated with new development is actually managed by our IES department. So if Chris T-Bear is on the line, I would like to refer the question to Chris.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Again, Chris T-Bear here, Director of Engineering, and thank you, Councillor McGregor, for the question. So yes, our development standards now recommend that we move forward with $350 per tree for all new developments that have gone through the new development standards. That applies to single detached, semi-detached, or townhouses, basically at a rate of 1 tree per unit. What our plan is to do is every fall we are going to assess which lots are actually ready to have a tree planted within their boulevard. We want to make sure that the house and all the utilities and everything have been built and have been implemented, so that we're not going to be putting a tree in the way to hinder any kind of construction activity. So every fall, our team is going to go out and do an assessment, do a review of all of the developments that actually bought into that program, and make sure that they're ready for a tree. Where it's going to be a tender process. We're going to have a contractor come in consultation with our parks team as well as our public works team to make sure that we select the correct tree for that area and for our boulevard trees, and then install them and then monitor them and make sure that they have a sufficient warranty period in place too for several years thereafter. So the goal is every fall to go out and assess and evaluate which locations are ready to receive a tree, or which lots are ready to receive a tree, which is basically when the house is going to be constructed.
Right, great. And as a follow-up to that, if there's someone with an existing residence and they want, they don't have a tree on a boulevard and maybe are interested in that, is there a process that they can go through to add one? Is it something they can do themselves? Do they, is there a place they can get some advice on suitable species selection?
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for the question. That's something that we haven't evaluated yet or really looked into yet. Right now, the development standards just identify the need for a tree for new developments. The thing with new developments, a lot of our new developments, they're following and adhering to a cross-sectional requirement for utilities. So we know what the boulevard is going to look like. We know where the best location is for the tree. The challenge that we're going to have for a lot of these existing developments is not knowing what the boulevard consists of, where the utilities are located. They may not be set up in the same fashion that we know the new developments are set up. So it will take a little bit more of a desktop review as well as maybe a field review to verify and make sure that there is sufficient room and adequate room to, in fact, plant a tree. It's not going to impact any utilities, gas mains, water lines, etc. It is something that we can investigate, but right now the program is just set up for the new developments.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Foss, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have an Amendment 3 that I would like to present, and I think Judy has a copy of that. And it states, number 3, planting new trees or replacing trees is strictly prohibited on a municipal drains or their working corridors. And B, all drains located adjacent to or on municipal road right-of-ways. And C, municipal dike structures. Tree removal along drains and dikes is essential to ensure optimal operational performance in accordance with structural requirements under municipalities' legislated responsibilities under the Drainage Acts and its bylaws. I'd also like to have Thomas Kelly make comments on that.
I'm just going to make sure that it's a friendly amendment. Councillor Sakachi and Councillor B. McGregor, is that you consider it a friendly amendment?
Mayor Kenneth, if it's okay, I'd rather, before I state that, I'd much rather hear Mr. Kelly's opinion on that, just because I've heard a lot of concern in the community in regards to the fact that we are kind of going above and beyond with the clearing of our drainage area. So I'd like to hear Mr. Kelly's opinion.
Certainly. I'll come back to you after Mr. Kelly comments. Kelly?
Thank you, Mayor. It's Thomas Kelly, General Manager of Infrastructure and Engineering Services. We fully support this amendment. As you read through the report, it is extremely detailed. It talks about a lot of very strong initiatives to move forward. Our concern was that these initiatives, though, are not applicable on items like dikes on drainage structures that we have within Chatham-Kent. And we just thought, I think this would be extremely clear to the public then, that from an operational perspective, we actually need to keep those structures clear of trees. In the case of a drain, we have some structural issues, certainly with trees there, but also the whole intent of the drain is to have the right flow. And if we, part of our task of our teams is continual maintenance, it's legislated by the Drainage Act. We have to ensure that we are meeting our flow requirements on those drains. In order to do that, we have to clear the brush, we have to clear the trees out. And often we only have 45 days to do so. When it comes to dikes, so that would be like even Erie Shore Drive and all of the Arta Dike structure that's along Thames River, our flood of 2 years ago, the primary issue was a weakened dike structure caused by gophers, but also trees along the dike. So we have been spending money, and a lot of the DMAF funding is spent trying to repair those dikes, remove some of the brush, remove the trees, and reinforce those dikes. So it's extremely important that the public understand that trees, we strongly support all the initiatives. However, we have to ensure that when our teams are out clearing the brush, clearing the trees in those areas, it's being done for very good reasons. And we wouldn't want any disruption to that work. Thank you.
Councillor Scott, are you good then? Or not?
Mr. Kelly, one quick question. When you're saying keep tree removal along the drains, what are we talking about regarding, are we just talking a status quo of 15 feet, 20 feet along every municipal drain? Like, what are we talking about in reference to, you know, around the drain? I'm just I need more clarification. I understand the concept, but like, are we talking about clearing every tree that's around municipal drain? Like, what's the correlation with space?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Kenneth. It's important to understand that there's municipal drains. There's also drains which we support on the roadside ditch, for example. So that's why we had it as two separate areas. The work that we're doing is, again, to ensure that there's flow. We have a corridor set up that is essentially approximately 15 feet on each side, outside at the top end of the drain. That gives us a working corridor so that we can go in with our equipment and do the clearing. So that's what we're asking for, that at times, even here in Chatham on Browns Drain, that we have just recently gone in there, and through that corridor, it gives us access. And then we have our contractors go in and clear the drain. And again, the sole purpose is to ensure that we have adequate capacity and flow so that when we have those heavy rains, all of that water is coming from the subdivisions, so that it's draining to the Browns Drain and then eventually out into Mitchell's Bay. It allows us to manage the water in these subdivisions to ensure that we don't have basement flooding, etc.
Mayor Caniff, may I speak? It's Tim Dick.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So just further to the comments to Councillor Sakachi's questions, the working corridors, Councillor Sakachi, vary from drain to drain. 15 feet would be accurate in a few, but most drains, the working corridors are a minimum of about 6 meters or 20 feet, and they can vary depending on the width of the drain. So it is a wider space, and what we typically see is very often residents will plant trees in those corridors, and we really have a struggle moving in there to do the required maintenance in future years when those trees are planted and become established and so on. So that's one of the reasons why this is a really important piece, especially with your initiative on wanting to get the tree cover, which we fully support, but strategically, we really need to be smart in the locations that we put the trees so that we don't put ourselves in a bind when it comes to having to remove them later to gain access to maintain the infrastructure.
Sorry, Councillor Scott, are you good with the amendment? If not, we can vote on it separately. Councillor Scotchy? We can't hear you, Councillor Scotchy.
Sorry, Mayor Caniff. Yes, you actually, just if you can, I would appreciate it to be split, please.
All right, we'll vote on it separately then. We'll continue on then. Okay, Councillor, we'll need a seconder for Councillor Foss's motion then. Councillor C. McGregor?
I'm happy to, but my hand is up for a question also, but I'm
Okay,
happy
yeah.
to second
All
that.
right. We need to. Okay, we'll continue on the discussion, but then we'll first vote on Councillor Foss's motion, and then we'll go on. But there's a number of hands up, so I'll continue on with that. So Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Pinson.
Thank you, through the mayor. I am in total agreement with number 3. That was my question, and thank you to Mr. Dick and Mr. Kelly for clarifying why. There are a lot of people in Chatham-Kent do not realize the extent of the drainage system in this municipality and the impact of trees. They're important, but the planning is very important. So I was very pleased to read that the best or beneficial management practice is going to be part of our asset management plan. I think that's where IES definitely needs to be in there. Mr. T-Bear, thank you for your comments, but I would ask that rather than an IES team go out and every year in the fall and look whether or not a tree is needed to be put on a lawn, could we not use one of our partners, our community partners, to do this, who already do that, as well as the public works adopting the cut a tree, replace a tree, and the $75,000 that they estimate would be with the need for the 2021 budget deliberations. Could part of that be recouped or saved through partnership with one of the organizations that we listed? I also agree with Gabriel and Councillor McGregor in the fact that we need to, part of our job would be in marketing these available programs. I myself did not even realize, where can I find it here, the Rotary Club's Imagine McGregor project. I have no idea that that was happening, and that's in my backyard. So I think, while it's good to plan, and it's wonderful that we have that database that Gabe was talking about for 2021. I think right now, if people know what's available for them to use, and they have a place to, a person or a place to ask where they can talk about a plan for their particular property, I think we need to market that, and we need to make it known how they go about that now and not wait till 2021. So I am in favor of this, obviously, particularly since we've added number 3.
Okay, Councillor Pinson, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Worship. Happy to see this moving forward, and I think Lower Thames is a perfect partner for this initiative. I would have liked to have seen the farming representatives included in on the process because they are big stakeholders in the tree cover process, as well as maintaining the existing tree cover. Hopefully anything regarding forestation in the future, they will be included in on it. I also agree with number 3 as well. It's already a struggle dealing with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries to get drainage work done. We don't need to add obstacles to make it more difficult. I think, strategic treeing here, I think is great for our community, and just happy to see it moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, and through the mayor. First, I'd like to thank Gabriel for the report. It was a great report, and bringing forward and looking at what we can move in and do moving in the future. I just wanted to ask, just for clarification, about number 1, administration and the Lower Thames continuing in collaboration. Further down in the report that I did read that St. Clair Conservation Authority is also interested. So I just want to assure anybody that might be interested in this program that actually might be within the St. Clair Conservation Authority jurisdiction, that they are still able to move through this program if they're interested, and even though under a different conservation authority, or do we have to pull that in to be able to move forward with this? That would be one, Gabriel, and I think these are going to Gabriel at least anyway. And the second one, I don't know, might go to Gabriel or Chris, and that is the Boulevard program. So I'm just going to assume that $350 is a fair sized tree. We're not planting twigs on a boulevard, because I do know when the conservation often does tree programs and allows for trees, they are, you know, could be 3 or 4 foot twigs that you're getting, or twigs, or, you know, small trees that you're getting. So I'm going to assume that they are in some of our developments, they would be larger trees. And once they are in there, are we going to work with the, say, the owner of the house or condominium or whatever behind that portion on the boulevard to work with watering these trees for the first couple of years? I heard that there was you know, guarantees on these trees and stuff, but they still need regular watering. So is that something we depend on the municipality to do, or are we working with the homeowners, condo owners, residents to take care of that?
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. It's Chris Teber again here, Director of Engineering. So this is it's going to be a very new contract for us. We've done a lot of consultation with some of our neighboring municipalities on, I guess, best practices and how they've managed a program like this as well. It's going to be a like almost like a package that's delivered to the resident about basically receiving a new tree on their property, what steps that they can take to kind of assist the municipality. But there will be a provision in the contract for this contractor that we retain every year to maintain the tree and make sure that it's well kept and in I guess sufficient or adequate condition to be turned over full time to that resident thereafter, either it be 1 year or 2 years. The $350 was something that's consistent again with our neighboring municipalities. It's a program and a cost that works very well for that kind of relationship with the contractor and the homeowner for that length of time. And the tree species is still something that we're going to be working out with our Public Works and Parks team to make sure that it's something that doesn't infringe on site obstruction, that it does grow. The root structure is actually something that grows more horizontally than vertically, not to compromise any of our infrastructure. It's anticipated to be like a 6-foot tree, typical to what you see in like for a boulevard type tree. But that is what our goal is.
Thank you. And then my other question was administration in the Lower Thames to continue in collaboration. So I'm just asking for those that might be interested, those of us that are governed under the St. Clair Conservation Authority.
Yes, hello, this is Gabriel Clark, Environmental Planner. I will try to respond to that through the Mayor, if I may. The LTVCA, as I mentioned previously, they administer the Alternative Land Use Services Program. It's one of, I would suggest to be a suite of conservation programs that the Conservation Authority offers. One of the primary benefits of ALICE, or Alternative Land Use Services, is the ability to channel funding from various provincial, federal, and for-profit and non-for-profit sources through ALICE Canada to the various communities that implement ALICE, such as Chatham-Kent. I was just actually on a meeting earlier this week talking about the various projects that the LTVCA had been able to implement, and 5 of them under the ALICE program were actually approved for implementation outside of their watershed. So they're actually working to ensure that as many interested landowners as possible are able to reach their stewardship objectives. Now, with regards to folks that are within the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority watershed, that conservation authority actually has a very similar program to Alice, and it's called the Healthy Watersheds Program. And it has very similar objectives. It connects landowners with information and resources to undertake stewardship activities. So I'm, as an employee of Chatham-Kent, I feel relatively new to the organization, and I have not had a chance to build a relationship with the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, as I have been able to with the LTVCA today. But that is definitely a strategic objective that I have in mind. And in the interim, I would refer interested landowners and community members to that live in that watershed to the SRCA Healthy Watersheds Program.
So I guess just one follow-up to that then. Would it not be better for the Rural Urban Tree Cover and Chatham-Kent project for administration to be working with both conservation authorities as opposed to just working with one, even if there are two different programs under two different names? There is a fairly large area of Chatham-Kent that is governed under the St. Clair Conservation Authority watershed. So just a thought, I'm not going to try and amend anything here. I greatly appreciate your report and the in-depth report that we've received. So, but I would ask that maybe that be a consideration moving forward.
Thank you very much for the suggestion, Councillor, and I will make it a strategic priority. Thank you.
No, thank you, Gabriel.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Just again, want to echo what others have said in terms of the kudos for the report and the recommendations of numbers 1 and 2. With regards to recommendation number 3, in reviewing the report that's in front of us, which is an extensive document, the word drain or drainage is only mentioned once. And while I certainly, in having conversations with Mr. Kelly and Mr. Dick and living right along the Thames River and having neighbors along the Thames River, understand their concerns, I do believe that recommendation number 3 is something that requires a very specific and technical background report. And I believe that is so because as a counselor, I am going to be asked to comment on why it is important to maintain this or to have this bylaw or to have this added in. And I think it's really important that we have fact on paper and recommendation on paper, and also give people in our agricultural communities an opportunity to make comment on it prior to approving. So I would like to move that we refer recommendation number 3 to our November, back to staff to provide us more detailed information at our November 23rd council meeting.
Okay, so we'll put that in, then, so we'll be voting on that first. If that fails. So now, right now, we'll deal with any questions on the deferring this until, so I see the hands up, Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Yeah, I think it's relevant to refer this back for some more information. I was going to provide an alteration, exploring if we could, if a tree can't be replaced on a drain, if we could look for the closest suitable area or ensure that we're providing another tree in the same vicinity if we can. So I think that would be something that we could add or explore if we do send this back, which I think it's not time dependent and makes some sense to have a better understanding of the challenges and the opportunities around how we can make sure we're following the spirit of what we're trying to do while maintaining drainage.
Okay, Councillor Foss, you're the last one up, and then we're going to vote on the deferral. Councillor Foss?
Sorry, I guess I'm concerned with timing. I'm not sure if we approve the rest of the motion, it will delay any work in the drainage department waiting for this report to come in. So I have a concern about that. So maybe if Mr. Kelly could maybe give us some direction on that.
Mr. Kelly?
Mayor Caniff, it's Tim Dick. I'll respond to that. I'm concerned as well, Councillor Foss, with that. I'm also concerned to a large degree with the idea of replacement of a tree for a tree. That is a huge issue, absolutely huge issue, and that will basically grind drainage maintenance and repair projects to a halt. So I have some large concerns. So yes, there's a potential that if this is passed tonight, the entire report, that it may largely affect works on drainage structures.
If I could also add, it's Thomas Kelly, GM of IES. We also have legislative requirements, particularly with the Drainage Act, that we have to respond. There's a part of the act says within 45 days. So this is an operation, this has been in our operations since the beginning of when we were clearing out drains. This would be a huge departure from that, and one that is not practical. With respect to the dikes, a lot of the money that we're spending now is because we do have trees developed on dikes. So the addition was just to clarify, really, to make sure we all understand that we cannot put trees or replacement trees. This whole philosophy, it cannot be applied to dikes or to drains. It's just something we can't do. And the technical side of it is in the motion. There's a structural issue with trees. And then secondly, it's just the overall flow. So you can imagine if you have a drainage full of trees, you're not going to get the same flow. And it's not any more complex than that, really. So we would strongly urge council to approve this. We looked at the report, and because of the depth of the report, we didn't want it to be misunderstood that we could start putting trees on all of our drains. A lot of these drains are on private property as well that are municipal drains. So, I mean, it's extremely complicated. And as Mr. Dick says, it really puts us in a tough spot now. Do we stop all drainage activity if this is going to be a new motion or a new philosophy from council on drains? So, thank you.
All right, Councillor Harrigan, final word on the motion.
Thank you. I read in the report that under recommendation number 2, I believe, the specific locations for tree replacements will be determined on a project by project basis, which tells me that perhaps in the drain work that it takes place between now and November 23rd, engineering could choose an alternate location on a property or within the municipality to replant trees. I also am experiencing this, again, being on the Thames River, and there's removal of trees on the dike, which is absolutely fine. It's part of what needs to happen. But Tim's team is wonderful in working with property owners to identify where, when relocating trees, is a safe spot for those trees. So again, I would say that I think it's very important that if we're going to go down the road of having conversations about, finite decisions on where we're going to, on the work around drainage, I think that needs to be included in this report or its own. So, perhaps that could be my interpretation versus Mr. Kelly's interpretation of the report. That sometimes happens, but I'm just not comfortable agreeing with Councillor Foss's motion without seeing some of that technicality on paper. That's all.
All right, we'll put this motion to vote. Yes, the motion 12A that the amendment of Councillor Foss be referred to administration for report back at the November 23rd council meeting. So that's what we're voting on right now.
All votes are in. Motion fails as it is 9-9.
All right, now we will go vote on Councillor Foss's motion of number 3. It's up on the screen right now. We'll put that to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
All right, and we'll go back to the main motion as amended. We'll vote on that.
All votes are in. Motion passes. Moving on to 12B, application for site plan control, Sunmaster Produce, Inc., care of Medicine, Inc., 6640 Rivard Line, Community of Dover.
Okay, can we get Councillor McGrail and Councillor Foss put on the floor, please?
Sure, I'll, happy
I'll
to.
move.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor McGrail moved it and Councillor Foss
I'll
seconded
second
it.
it. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McGrail, the floor is yours.
Sure. Just in light of our deputation that we had from Mr. Kuchar, I would like Ryan just to comment. There has been some development since the deputation came out, so I thought maybe if we could get an update of what's going on, and that I have talked to Mr. Kuchar and he is in agreement. So Ryan, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. I can provide some information. First, I do advise council to proceed with approving the site plan as presented in the report tonight. The issue raised by the letter writer can be dealt appropriately through existing processes that are in place. Site plan approval will give the developer of the greenhouse, a path to implementing their development in its entirety, including the stormwater management pond and its outlet into a private ditch on the neighboring property. Chatham-Kent has approved a stormwater management plan for this greenhouse facility. It's largely an expansion and relocation of an existing pond that's been on site for a number of years. The outlet or the pipe leaving this pond to the private ditch on the neighboring property is currently larger than what those two landowners have agreed to in the past. However, the approved stormwater management plan that has not been implemented yet does comply not only with Chatham-Kent and MECP standards, but also this private agreement between the two landowners. So since the letter was received earlier this afternoon, our Chatham-Kent's engineering department has reached out to the consulting engineer for the greenhouse developer to bring this to their attention and highlight it as a priority. Chatham-Kent's building department reached out to Mr. Couture and assured him that the pipe size will be reduced to meet the private agreement, and the pipe would have to be reduced for the greenhouse to obtain full building occupancy permits from CK as part of the completion of the site plan development. And earlier, I also talked with Mr. Art Karen, the owner of the subject property, to keep him up to date on all of these occurrences, which does mainly relate to an agreement between two private landowners. However, there's obviously an implication with the development on this property, which requires council's approval. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes. 12D, Hitchcock Road name change to Tweedsmuir Ave West.
Councillor Kirkwood-White and Councillor Crew, can I get you put on the floor, please?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, Councillor Latimer?
Thank you through the mayor. I'm not sure who this question goes to, but as a community occupational therapist, I can tell you that when I often service populations outside of Chatham-Kent, and whenever where, example, Tweedsmuir Ave West would end at one street and start up at another street, how would I know that if I were not familiar with the area? So I understand why you want to change the name because of the build and development that is occurring along Hitchcock Road. But how long before we're actually going to have houses on Hitchcock Road before we have the extension between, or the actual road moving between Tweedsmuir Ave West and Kyle to Tweedsmuir or Ave West at Howard?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's Ryan Jocks, manager of the planning department. I think I can address the question, at least in part. With regard to the road name change and the roads not connecting, as stated in the report, this really is the ideal time as there's no development fronting Hitchcock Road and using that name. It was contemplated back in the 1990s that this be done when following the annexation of these lands from Raleigh Township into the city of Chatham at the time. The reality is that once houses are developed on Hitchcock Road, there'll be several dozen houses on either side of the road. It's, in my opinion, in my experience in road renaming over the years, it's very unlikely that the residents in Chatham-Kent would go forward with a road name change. It's not impossible, but it's trickier. So if the road's not changed, it'd simply be Hitchcock Road for a block, and that's fine, really. But from an overall build-out perspective, it would be better if it was Tweedsmuir all the way to Bloomfield. Now, that leaves the part of the question about timing. In the last 3 years, there has been significant activity by multiple developers in the Southwest Quadrant, probably at a faster rate than at any point since amalgamation has Chatham been growing in this area at this pace. If that continues and for how long, obviously I can't predict, but it's likely to proceed for the next few years anyway, with the pent-up demand in the market and the regional migration of people to Chatham-Kent from other parts of the province. If I had to guess, it would be at least 10 years, maybe more, before Tweedsmuir Avenue connected from Kyle to Howard Road. Thanks, those are my comments now, but happy to answer any more questions.
I thank you, Ryan. I still think we are just going to confuse people because people have addresses that are Tweedsmuir Ave West. That's anywhere west of Queen Street, correct? To Kyle Drive. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then we'll have Tweedsmuir Ave West from Howard to Bloomfield. How are you to know to differentiate?
The only differentiation will be the actual number assigned to the property. But for the traveling public, it's likely that some people, you're right, will get to a point where they cannot go any further and will have to detour.
Yes. Well, yes, and that's detour, but there's no known detour. If you're not familiar with the area, and it is now with the GPS, it's a little easier, but I don't see the sense in changing this right now. If it's going to be 10 years and we don't know when those houses are actually going to be located on Hitchcock Road. So I'm just, as a community therapist, I read this, I went, oh boy, and if you have to change when the time comes for extension, it'd be no different than LaCroix and Sandy and Orangewood, which is always in Chatham, which we do all the time, or we have done in the past, and many people just shake their head who aren't from this area, why we have to have 3 names for one street. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. Earlier in the meeting, when it wasn't so late and wasn't so dark, I looked out my window onto Howard Road in Hitchcock because I'm still at the office. And I have a question for Ryan first and then a comment. Ryan, Tweedsmuir runs east-west or west-east, as does Hitchcock. Can you tell me whether the lands to the south of Hitchcock, which is a very short street, or road right now, how are they zoned? Are they zoned for residential development?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. If the former City of Chatham boundary did not actually follow Hitchcock Road, Howard Road, and Indian Creek Road exactly, there was the approximate depth of one residential lot, call it a couple of 100 feet south of Hitchcock, west of Howard, and south of Indian Creek, which formed part of the city's planning area at that time. That planning framework has carried forward into the, all of Chatham-Kent's planning framework. So to answer the question specifically, the lands on the other side of Hitchcock are zoned for urban residential development, the same as the north side.
That's what I thought. That's what my memory was. I thought the reason you were doing this in part was so we don't end up with a LaCroix, Sandy, Orangewood, LaCroix. So that you do have, you've organized it so that when things do progress, that it'll automatically be Tweedsmuir without any issues that we, obviously the city fathers or mothers or whoever they were in the 1970s didn't do that on LaCroix and Orangewood and Sandy's. Now there's a very good reason for that. The bridge that goes across the river at LaCroix that joins with Sandy's wasn't there until 1985. But Sandy's, of course, was. So your logic for doing this makes good sense to me. You want to avoid having those kind of situations, and it seems to me you're just being proactive. It may be a while before Tweedsmuir West hits Howard Road that I'm sitting on right now, but there certainly has been a lot of development in this area in the last 5 years. In fact, in the last 2 years. So I think it's a wise thing that you're doing. It's proactive.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Item 13, infrastructure and engineering services.
13A, Connecting Links Program Application, Dufferin Ave Rehabilitation, Community of Wellsburg.
Councillor Hall and Councillor C. McGregor, can you each put on the floor, please?
Yes, happy to move the recommendation.
Happy to also. Thank you.
I just have a few questions as well.
Okay, Councillor Hall, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Caniff, and thank you for the report, Mr. T-Bear. I just have a few questions here. It says in the report that cold in place recycling is the most feasible option for the pavement resurfacing. Chris, can you describe what this is exactly and how it compares to what the current surface is on this stretch of Dufferin Ave?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Certainly. Thank you for the question. So cold in place is it's an environmentally friendly process whereby the existing asphalt is milled and recycled. So basically a foamed asphalt cement is added to the existing asphalt to rejuvenate the base mixture. Once it's relayed, we put a surface coat of asphalt added on top, And essentially this surface would be identical to the existing surface, which is just your typical kind of asphalt surface. So Cold in Place is a environmentally friendly kind of base rejuvenation process where we're using that base asphalt. And we have used this on many roads throughout the municipality and seen great success. We're also making this recommendation too for Grand Ave East project, which is the 2019 Connecting Link project.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Chris. Also, in the report, it says that in addition to the pavement structure with this project, any items that are deficient, including curb and gutter, sidewalks, catch basins, sewers, and water mains, would be replaced as part of the project. So, Chris, can you kind of provide a high-level update on what the status is on these additional elements and then some costs that could be projected from with this project?
Yes, certainly. So if we are provided the Connecting Links funding, if we're successful with our application to the MTO, our first step is going to be to hire a consultant to review the existing infrastructure to really determine the extent of the work. This would include like a review of the existing storm sewers, the sanitary sewers, capacity, structural integrity. What we're aware of and what we know is the above surface condition of the road, of the sidewalk, and the curbs. What we don't know at this time is the underground infrastructure and the condition of it. So once we retain that consultant, we'll be able to identify through video inspection, through further consultation, dialogue, and review what the actual scope of the project is going to be to then put that forward as a project for construction. So right now at this time, we don't have a project estimate on hand, only because our goal is to receive that once we get approval with this project through the MTO, through the Connecting Link, and then have that future plan in place.
Excellent. Thank you for that as well. One more question. I know there's some work that the province is doing along Highway 40, along this same Connecting Link heading towards Sarnia Way. I'm not sure when that's starting, but I think that's supposed to be, they're doing an environmental assessment on it. Anyway, I had some questions from some folks in the community about kind of that remaining stretch of Dufferin Avenue. So starting at Highway 40 to where this project is being considered. So what's the status of that stretch of roadway right now, and what are the future plans for that stretch?
Yes, of course. So you are correct. That project right now is still in the process of undergoing a environmental assessment through the MTO. Dufferin from the west limits of Walsburg all the way up into Sarnia, so essentially Highway 40 is the property of the MTO and the responsibility of the MTO. This is a planned road recondition or road resurfacing project that they have slated for 2021 construction. Our team, the engineering team and IES, has been in full consultation with their consultant and with the MTO throughout the whole EA, municipal class EA process. And we've been submitting our comments and feedback in regards to the planned construction, the detour routes, and how they're going to stage construction, etc. All that is being considered right now. We have not received detailed plans yet, but it is still anticipated for a 2021 project.
Okay, and then sorry, just one more follow-up, Mayor Kenneth. So that the remaining stretch, I guess, so at the start of Highway 40 to the start of what this project is, what is it, over near Ontario Avenue, I think, along Dufferin. What's the status of that stretch of road? I guess it would be that last piece that connects the two projects that we've been talking about. What's the status of that?
So this project, this Connecting Link project is basically bringing us right to the west limits of, the plan was to bring it to the west limits of Walsburg and basically tie right into where the MTO is going to be leaving off. So we were not anticipating any gap in between the two projects with the roadways.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thank you very much. Looking forward to supporting this tonight, and hopefully we get the support from the province through this program as well. So thank you, Chris, for the answers. Thank you, Mayor Kenneth, for the time.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Just missing one, Council. All votes are in. Motion passes. On to 13B, school zone speed limits and community safety zones, phase 3.
Councillor Sakachi.
I'd be happy to move the recommendations with an amendment, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, what's the amendment? And we'll get a seconder for that.
Thank you. 1 second, Mayor Caniff. I'd like to add 11 and 12. 11 to the existing maximum speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour on Cundall Line between Charing Cross Road and Erio Road in the community of Harwich, Charing Cross, be deleted and replaced with a 40-kilometer maximum speed limit zone at all times and on the same roadway section. And number 12, a community safety zone be implemented at all times on Cundall Line between Charing Cross Road and 25 meters east of Erio Road in the community of Charing Cross.
Okay, Councillor Hall, will you second that?
Yes, I'll happy to second.
All right, back to you, Councillor Sakachi, for comments.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just very brief, in efforts to contact the residents in the community, there was a school that was mistakenly left off, and that is the school that is on Cundall Line. It's a very active spot for children playing, and I think it's just important that we include that in our bylaw as well. And that's all the comments I have. I'll be supporting the whole 13B as it states.
Okay, Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a quick question, and I apologize ahead if I missed it in the report, but what is the expected timeline, I guess, for these for this project and for the installation of these signs? When can we expect them to be completed, and not just for these new phases that we're supporting? I guess all the phases of the project. From what I understand, there was still some delay, I guess, with some of the installation of signs in Wallaceburg. Just wondering what the timeline is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Mark Seppi, engineering technologist with Engineering and Transportation Division. We plan on begin with the preparation of the work orders for the Phase 3 signs, and as stated in the report, the Phase 3 also included modifications to some locations in Wallaceburg that were part of Phase 1. And we hope to have all of these signs installations completed by the end of this fall.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a real quick question. What happens when, for example, we have 3 schools, I believe, 4 schools that are now not schools because of the super school, and they still have those speed zones on there? Are we going to take those signs down now that they're not actual schools?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Mark Seppi again. We were in consultation with the school board in regards to school closures, and to my knowledge, any schools that were planned for closure since the beginning of this project 2 years ago, we have already left them off the road or off our lists. So I'm not aware of any schools that have currently been shut down that we installed any signs at. I'd have to look into that, or if you have a list of these schools, we can definitely look into that.
I'm just questioning because we did receive a council forum today, and I think one of the ones that they did mention, and I didn't drive by, so I can't tell you, but was Our Lady of Fatima.
Oh yes, okay, I saw that as well. And so again, through consultation with the school board, it was explained to us that Lady of Fatima is currently closed, but is closed for renovations, and the plan is to reopen the school next fall, and it will be I believe a French immersion school, so all the French immersion students will be attending Lady of Fatima, and at that time next year, Monsieur Ewan School on Lark Street in Chatham will be closed. So we anticipate Lady of Fatima to be an operating school again next fall in 2021.
Perfect. Thank you for the explanation.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Mark, I'd imagine this is probably for you. I read in the report for all the different speed changes, it's indicated at all times. And I understand that would just mean that the speed changes would exist 12 months of the year. So my question is, I had somebody come in today and ask me this. Do other communities exempt summer months when school's not in? Obviously, I think that would be probably a little confusing, but the question was asked, and I don't know, do other communities make those exemptions for, you know, these speed changes only when school's actually in session?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'm not aware of any communities that do have speed limit changes just with signs. I know through the Highway Traffic Act, if we want to install variable speed limits on our roadways, we need to basically construct an electronic beacon system or illuminated light. And so when the speed limit is in effect, the yellow lights are flashing to alert drivers. So we've chosen to follow the regulations in the Highway Traffic Act and the Ontario Traffic Manual in regards to variable speed limits. And that's why, for instance, Grand Avenue is recommended for one of these devices.
Okay, great, Mark. That should clear it up. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes. 13C, motion by Councillor Sakachi, re community beautification services levels.
Councillor Scotchy?
Should I recite the motion, Mayor Caniff?
Yes, please.
Okay. Whereas on June 22nd, Councillor Harrigan brought forth a successful motion which was approved by Council that administration provide a report to Council identifying the current levels of service for support of beautification initiatives provided to communities for service such as flower baskets, hanging and holiday street light decorations, and that this report recommend processes or policies, new or existing, to improve the scheduling and or equalize the service levels across CK, along with budget implications associated with those recommendations. And where subsequent to the motion, Council received an approved recommendation in the report regarding downtown service levels standardizations on January 13th, 2020. And whereas on May 11th, Council approved a resolution reducing the service level due to COVID-19. Be it therefore resolved that Council directs staff to return to normal service levels for community beautification going forward with regards to downtown banners, decorations, flowers, baskets, and barricade installations for special events. The beautification of our community continues to be an important part of Chatham-Kent during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that the upcoming Remembrance Day and holiday season, which is normally supported by the Public Works Department in the form of hanging banners and or decorations, resumes to normal standards.
Councillor Harrigan, will you second that?
Happy to second it, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, Councillor Scotchy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a really brief comment. I know Councillor Latimer does have a motion subsequent to this as well, that in regards to restoring services. This one here is very specific in regards to the beautification process, as well as providing support to our communities for, you know, if we are able to have some sort of, you know, Remembrance Day ceremonies, as well as, you know, Christmas decorations, which is obviously extremely important to our community during these very trying times. So I think the motion speaks for itself, and that is what comments I have, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Just very quickly, Mayor Caniff, I wanted to express my support for this motion. I think that it is very community focused. So thank you, Councillor Sakachi, for bringing it up in good time for us to plan for these upcoming celebrations.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just also wanted to comment about the motion coming forward, and I think there will be a lot of legions and others greatly appreciative if this passes. A lot of them are struggling financially due to COVID, and I think this is something to help them move the Remembrance Day services forward. It's my understanding that many will be virtual in manner or very low-key events, but this is one way that we actually can help them recognize our veterans and by helping them get their signs up and the memorial signs on the banners. And if we're doing that, it certainly makes sense to be pulling one down and switching it out to help our community support the Christmas and the season coming forward and in a manner to at least light up our communities. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Item 14, Finance, Budget, Information, Technology, and Transformation.
14A, motion by Council Latimer, return to pre-COVID approved budget service levels.
Over to you, Councillor Latimer.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we return to full 2020 pre-COVID-19 approved budget service levels for all remaining services for the remainder of 2020 where warranted by demonstrated community demand and where allowed under COVID-19 public health restrictions, with a full variance report provided to Council prior to 2021 budget deliberations.
Can I get a seconder for that, please? Councillor Thompson?
Happy to second that.
Okay, floor is yours, Councillor Latimer.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I've had discussions with our CEO and our CFO, Gord Quinton, who has assured myself that this action will not be placing our municipality in financial jeopardy. And I think it also viewing the several issues brought forward in the human and social impacts of COVID-19 report tonight, that it's the necessity of returning to these budgeted services that directly impact women, children, childcare, caregiver support, safe recreation opportunities, that free center support, addiction and mental health services, and also who do not currently have reliable internet service to access to such. We have our strategy growth and recovery session this week where we begin to prioritize and plan forward to our 2021 year and budget. But it's important, I think, now to attempt to return to some normalcy within a safe context and a fiscally responsible manner where demand is evident for services that we have budgeted for the remainder of this year.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I have a question directed, I believe, either to Mr. Gord Quinton or Dr. April Redyke. And it's in regards to some of the services where there's significant regulation. So specifically, the ELP program is something I had brought up before over email and spoken about in council. Would this motion prompt the renewal of those services, or are there other preparations that would need to be put into place prior to us reigniting programs such as the ELP program?
Through you, Mayor Kenneth, April Redyke, General Manager, Community Human Services. I would like to comment on this, and then if Gord Quinton has any comments, he can add to that. Certainly the ELP Early Learning Program is a legacy program that is a result of our Best Start demonstration pilot that lasted for some significant time. Only Chatham-Kent and Sarnia-Lambton and only the rural areas of Chatham-Kent and Sarnia-Lambton were eligible for ELP. So as we have suspended the early learning program, we have not canceled it. We've suspended it through the fall. We will revisit it in January. There are significant costs that have been associated with the reopening of childcare, and we need to ensure really looking at a combination of lower limits or limits to everything from extra cleaning and PPE and on and on and on that are impacting our childcare centers, that we need to ensure what those overall costs are. And this program is really is significantly funded through our cost shared allocations. And those allocations have not increased. They have maintained for 2020, but they have not increased. So our recommendation would be for us to get and take this back and have a really good look at some of our provincially funded programs as we're just kind of coming through and starting with the reopening of all of our programs and services to get a sense of what that looks like. What I don't want us to run into is starting programs back up when we actually, due to all of the other regulations that we have to follow, we don't have enough budgeted dollars to ensure that they are viable moving forward. And I don't know if Gord has anything else to add to that.
Hi, it's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer. Yes, adding to what April's said there, there's in the motion that's on the floor, there's three very important phrases in that motion. One is returning to 2020 pre-COVID-19 approved budgets, service levels. So as April has just described, it would take even more of an extra budget above our approved service levels to be able to reopen that particular program. And then we also have where warranted by demonstrated community demand and we're allowed under COVID-19 public health restrictions. So there are three parts of this notice of motion that are very key in determining what facilities can be reopened. There may be not specific to the childcare, but there may be other facilities that we're talking about that it's just not possible to physically distance in, for example, or that there's very, very low demand because of people staying at home, or that it would take even more dollars to able to run that program, such as the childcare program. Thanks.
Thank you. And obviously the concern from a financial perspective is the latter scenario that you provided, right? Where what we budgeted in February is actually now not enough to cover the same level of service or the same programs for families and community members because of new COVID restrictions or PPE or social distance requirements. So how will that be communicated back to council? How will we be informed of those differences?
So, hi, it's Gord Quinton again. So this, the general manager is involved in delivering whichever service is being reopened is going to have to communicate with both the public and council on what the demonstrated community demand has been and whether they're able to open under COVID restrictions. So I'm assuming each general manager will be able to communicate that as the reopening strategies. For example, with libraries, you have seen press releases come out detailing when and which libraries are ready to be reopened. At no time are we saying at this time that that we have the demand or are able under public health restrictions to open all libraries. As an example, we need April and her team would need to evaluate each one on its own and look at the demand and the COVID restrictions and make that decision and communicate that within a press release out to the public.
Great, thank you. I appreciate how the motion is worded. I think that it, is really asking staff to go back to the service levels, basic if we can afford it, where warranted. So I'm happy to support this motion, and thank you, Councillor Latimer, for doing all the work.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The question would be for Gord. Gord, I know this might be difficult to predict, but I read in the paper a couple weeks ago that there are many thousands of residences, businesses that are behind in their taxes, basically. So as this motion's really kind of it's a money question, is there any way that we can predict what kind of shortfall we may anticipate with a decline in property tax revenue, which is primarily our main source of revenue? And will that affect us? Presumably it's going to affect us somehow, but is there any way you can maybe put somewhat of a prediction on where that's going to leave us with our financial situation? If there's, I think I read up to 5,000 different accounts are behind on their taxes, and that was maybe a month ago, so things may have changed. So if you could just, shed some light on where that puts us financially, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi. Again, it's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer. So we did see that story out in the public. The data behind that story actually pointed that people are actually more paid up on their taxes than comparing to 2018 or 19. So although there's still perhaps 5,000 taxpayers delinquent, it's actually an improvement over last year, which is very surprising during COVID-19. But I think it can say to the people who have made a priority of making sure their main bills were paid up. And part of that might have had a lot to do with the funding that eventually came through from the federal government, either through the CERB to individuals, where they were getting $2,000 a month revenue, or with the help that eventually came to small businesses through the federal loan programs and the other programs that they had. So bottom line, we're actually better situated than in the last couple of years. It's actually our receivables have actually gone down, even though we're in what is thought to be a pretty hard times for many out there. In the long term, it's going to it really depends on the length of the pandemic and how quickly businesses are able to recover. Businesses or individuals are able to recover and get their jobs back and be able to pay their bills. So there's definitely are individuals and businesses out there that have not been able to pay their taxes because of COVID-19. The tax sale process does allow for a couple years of grace before we get actively into the tax sale process. So we really need to see how the economy recovers over the next 2 years to see if there's any long-lasting impacts.
Oh, well, thanks, Gord. Yeah, I thought it might be sort of a difficult question to predict because it's such a long-term event. But if we're in, financially a better position with tax collection than we were in the last couple of years. That's surprisingly very good news, and it's very surprising. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Solomon.
Thank you very much, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, I'm struggling a bit with this one right now. I really appreciate what Councillor Latimer's intent is with this motion. I guess I'm just concerned that this motion may provide a bit of false sense to the community as some of the programs and services, they may not be ready. I think as Dr. Ritek explained, or they might not be able to continue right now. And I just feel like there's a lot more questions that I think council should get answers to before we move forward with this. So I would like to see a report from staff detailing what this looks like. So I would move that this motion be deferred back to staff for more information to come back at our next council meeting.
Can I get a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that. It's Doug Solomon.
Okay, Councillor Solomon. Okay, so we will, Councillor Solomon, you had your hand up to talk. The floor is yours.
I'll be very brief. My questions were asked by Councillor Bondi, some of them, but the other ones are the revenue issues. And I'd like Gord Quinton to speak to the revenue issues, such as the drop-off of revenue at the casino and any other areas where you may see drop-off in revenues. And I'd like him also to address at the same time the question of the budget motion we passed that I thought was a zero budget, but zero budget increase. I can wait till, if this passes, I can wait till it comes back in a report, which might be the smarter idea. If it fails, then I'd like to get those answers.
All right, sounds good. I will, I see no other hands, so we'll put it up, the vote up for deferral. And if it fails, Councillor Solomon will come back to you. Otherwise, we'll stay tuned for next council meeting. Okay, so Councillor C. McGregor, this has to be on the deferral. Your question. All right, I see it's not. All right. Meredith, are we going to get that up on the screen? All right, we'll put this to vote that the motion be referred back to administration, report back to the next council meeting.
All votes are in. Motion passes.
Okay, notice of motion. Councillor Thompson has a notice of motion.
Thank you very much. Hang on just a second. I got to get microphone back in there. I, Councillor Trevor Thompson, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward to the following motion for discussion and voting to the October 5th meeting. And I just have to pull it up here. Whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent actively looks to attract new residents by way of remote workers having improved work from home options available in both urban and rural settings. And whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent continued to be an employer of choice for top talent, and that the municipality set the example for business by creating a work from home policy program for staff members. And whereas the municipality looks to reduce costs through the use of right-sizing our infrastructure based on trends seen across organizations who are reducing their physical footprint while maintaining or increasing staffing levels. Therefore, be it resolved that the Chief Human Resource Officer undertake a review of positions that are currently working from home, positions that could be working from home, and potential work from home opportunities in the future, and that the report outline recommendations to both sustain an appropriate level of working remotely through the pandemic and to implement a long-term policy program for working remotely post the pandemic.
Okay, non-agenda business.
Sorry, Mayor
Councillor
Kenneth,
Sakachi?
I apologize. I also have a notice of motion.
Oh, okay, Councillor Sakachi.
I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the October 19th council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas council hears consistently from citizens regarding derelict buildings and properties in our community which require upkeep or demolition, and whereas many of those problematic buildings and properties have repeat issues such as fires or negative impacts on the community, and whereas there is often a public perception that these buildings and properties should be dealt with at a quicker speed, and whereas the municipality is restricted in what it can do and at the speed it can address these issues due to provincial laws which the municipality cannot change, therefore be it resolved that administration prepare a report to council's consideration at a future meeting summarizing the available tools and practices for addressing derelict buildings and properties, the timelines associated with those tools and practices, whether any of those timelines can be shortened, any other items which delay or negatively impact addressing derelict buildings and properties, and any recommendations for changes to process that could help address the important community issue.
Okay, thank you. Non-agenda business. Okay, seeing none, I just want to add one quick thing this is a question for Mr. McAllister regarding patio bylaw. I know it comes up December 30th or December 31st, 2020, it expires. And I just want to give public an update as to for what you're working on post December 31st, 2020.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Bruce McAllister here, Acting General Manager of Community Development. So at this point, as you mentioned, our temporary outdoor patio guidelines are in place until January 1, 2021, which is currently in line with the same time frame as the AGCO's temporary time frame to allow restaurants and bars to temporarily extend outdoor patios. So at this point, it's not clear yet what the province will do in 2021 in terms of regulations for temporary patios. I think we can all envision a scenario where these things will be extended. That being said, as we noted in our original report back on June 15th, we do intend to bring a report to council by the end of the year. Probably the first meeting in December, outlining what we've learned based on our experience this year, along with a review of other best practices, and to provide some options going forward to council. So this could be, subsequent formal changes to our zoning bylaw if we want to adopt, more formal, permanent, seasonal patio guidelines in our zoning. It could be some other regulatory changes as well. So that's the update I have right now, Your Worship. Do you have any other questions?
Nope, I just wanted to make sure that council and public were aware that you're working on that, and we'd love to see vibrant outdoor dining throughout Chatham-Kent moving forward. Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I got the hand up there a little bit late. I do have a question for Thomas Kelly. I intended to get to it the last couple of meetings, but we were running pretty late. I was hoping that he could provide an update on the work going on around Mud Creek. I ran into the drainage superintendent, Ellen Sinclair, and she did a great job sort of explaining what the future of that project looked like. I wanted to thank her for that, and maybe have Mr. Kelly review that publicly so people can understand what the plan for that area is.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. My colleague Tim Dick is on the line, and I'm going to take advantage of that and ask him to speak to this concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So thanks for the question, Councillor McGregor. So currently what's happened is, of course, we've reestablished the width of the drain and depth of the drain to restore basically the stormwater management capability of the drain. And so it looks as it currently does. The water levels have been lowered and so on, which again is back to the design and original levels. What had happened over the past 20 or 30 odd years is that the levels kept creeping up because the actual depths of the drain it had sedimented in and so on, and the depths of the drain had reduced. So of course we have the spoil, which we've placed up on the surrounding areas and so on. And you will notice that near the McGregor, near the pump station and closer to Indian Creek Road, we have leveled and began to work some of the tops of that. It actually worked fairly well there. And then we received that a couple inches of rain or so, which made things too wet again. So typically it's not unusual for it to take a year for that type of material to dewater and get dry enough that we're in a position where we can level it and work it and actually get it seeded. So what we would expect is that it would remain there. If it does continue to be dry here this fall, we may be able to do some further leveling work and so on, and get things looking a little better than it does out there. In addition, a lot of that, or some portions of the materials that have been removed, will actually be replaced or will be used to repair damaged area, not damaged, but deteriorated areas, such as the one behind the Mud Creek Ball Diamonds near the culvert there, where water would, in a large rain event, the water would actually be up into the grassed areas and over the path and so on. So we intend to fix those areas. And also, if you're walking the creek, you'll notice many of the larger storm sewer outlets and culvert pipes sticking out are, some of them have head walls that are just hanging in the air. And again, that's caused from erosion and years of going sort of as is. So we plan to work on those areas. There may be some stone in some of those areas, replace some soil in there and so on. So it's a fairly extensive project still to come. And as well, possibly next summer, the crossing under Sylvester needs to be replaced as well. And that one is a complicated one because it's settled a lot, and there is a sewer, I believe a sewer line that runs through there as well, a sanitary sewer. So we'll be required to do some extensive support and so on in engineering to be able to get that supported while we replace the culvert. So again, there will be notice of that and so on, but it's not a project which is going to be done anytime in the near future. It's going to take time.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate the update.
Councillor Harrigan.
Councillor Harrigan, we can't hear you. Councillor Harrigan, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, Judy, passing. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Okay, we'll move on to the bylaws as amended. Can I get Councillor Oche and Councillor Wright, the first and second reading?
Oh,
moved.
Second that.
So,
all right, anyone opposed? Carried. Reading the third and final reading, Councillor Solomon, Councillor Pinsino.
Moved. Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. Carried. 19, resolution of council.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its, Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, the Chatham-Kent Council adjourned to a strategic planning session to be held on Monday, September 28th, 2020, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorized itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss matters permitted by the Municipal Act, and that the next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, October 5th. And I do apologize. I'm so accustomed to reading it, I hadn't pre-read it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Finn, can you second that?
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, carried, and we will we'll close this meeting. Have a great day and have a great night, everyone.